In The Shield, we follow Vic Mackey and his strike team as they battle their way on the streets of Farmington against drug dealers and gangbangers. Vic Mackey is one of the most fascinating and complex anti-heroes depicted on television. A man who is involved in numerous crimes and evil actions, but who has a charm about him that hoodwinks you into often rooting for him throughout the show. When it's all said and done though, I think most fans are in agreement that though he does have his good points, Vic is not a man to be admired and emulated. One of the most fascinating things about the man is not that he didn't have a conscience. It's that he did have a conscience, that he did have a moral compass, but he was able to turn it off and on when he wanted, compartmentalizing and justifying his actions to himself and others in order to mentally separate himself from the scum he tries to keep off the streets. Mackey can be generous and helpful, but he can be greedy and cruel. He can be honourable and chivalric, but he can also be spiteful and murderous. The character has a charismatic edge to him that has not only us wanting him to succeed, but other cop characters begrudgingly accept his unruly policing methods as they've time and again proven to be effective.
Good cop and bad cop left for the day. I'm a different kind of cop.
Today I wanted to count down what I think are Mackey's 7 worst actions in the show. Of course, with the amount of crimes the man has done, it's not possible to get everything in there, and the sheer volume of his evil actions means I'm probably going to end up forgetting to add something that I really should have.
I've done worse.
Also, I'm looking to mix it up a little bit with my list, as if we only go by what many of us will consider the ultimate evil action, murder, then the list will be just a list of killings done by Vic, which is a little boring. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with future videos. It'll stop you having to worry and say, I wonder what he's going to upload today. I wonder what he's going to upload tomorrow. Some honourable mentions before we begin, and of course let me know what you think were Vic's most heinous actions down in the comment section below. Vic sleeps with Kavanagh's mentally unwell wife and taunts him about it. He blackmails Julian to get him to recant his strike team allegations. He helps Ben Gilroy kidnap a young gang member who was a witness to his hit-and-run incident and helps Gilroy dispose of the body when he shoots him, dumping the body in a rival gang's turf and potentially igniting a gang war. After hunting down Margos, the hitman who had been tasked with finding and killing those responsible for the money train robbery, Margos drops his gun and surrenders, but Vic puts 2 in his chest and stages the crime scene so it looks like it was self-defense. Not to mention numerous scenes of torture, like shoving a suspect's head into a fish tank that had a snake in it, shocking a teenager with a stun gun, almost drowning a man in a barrel of oil, allowing a police dog to mutilate a man's genitals, extorting a suspect by stacking tires around him and threatening to burn him alive if he doesn't pay him, and a whole lot of other things. Heck, now that I think about it, my list kinda looks a bit mild when you factor in Vic's torture and assault of supporting and minor characters. And there's also potential of great crimes that Vic could have done, but never got round to doing, like shooting Shane and Mara in front of their boy, which he was about to do before the cops got the drop on him. And even contemplating killing the kid if he was a little older, only settling on not taking him out because, and I quote, Jackson is too young to be a witness. So let's begin. At number 7, Gaslighting Tavon. Tavon is a well-liked cop who joins the strike team after an audit recommends a minority becomes part of the team. Vic develops a fondness for Tavon, but Shane, due to his racism and jealousy, dislikes the man. Tavon visits Shane at his apartment to end the feud, but things escalate and the two get into a brutal physical fight in which Tavon gets the better of Shane, but Shane's girlfriend Mara hits Tavon on the head with an iron, leading him to stumble away and attempt to drive off in his van before he crashes into a parked car and ends up in a coma. In order to protect Shane and his girlfriend, when Vic visits Tavon in hospital, he tries to convince Tavon that it was actually he who went into a furious rage, almost killing Shane's pregnant girlfriend. In order to drive the point home, Vic has a clearly conflicted Lem also try to convince Tavon, and once he is convinced, he is shattered, devastated and apologetic. Now, of course, in the grand scheme of things, this is nowhere near as bad as some of the stuff Vic does in the show, and in a way you can see why he's doing what he's doing to protect his friend Shane and Shane's pregnant girlfriend. But when you factor in that Shane was insecure over his own inabilities, he was petty and racist towards Avon, Marla was the one who nearly killed him, and him being lucky to survive the crash, and after all that, he walks away from the situation out of action and having to believe that he almost killed a pregnant woman, crying in his hospital bed, not being able to fathom it. It's ugly stuff. It's Vic taking advantage of an incapacitated person who was a solid member of the team, all for a piece of crap like Shane. At number 6, it's his general criminal activity. Not anything specific per se, but a list of Vic Mackey's crimes can't be complete without acknowledging that in his day-to-day activities he's making the world a worse place. As Kavanagh says, he kills cops, he beats suspects, he deals drugs. There's a method to Vic's madness, of course, but the line between working with gangsters to secure peace on the streets and manufacturing events to line his own pockets are often blurred. He steals drugs, he sells them back on the streets, he allows dealers and murderers to continue working. How many lives have been indirectly destroyed as a result of Vic being part of this system? How many children got a hold of drugs that he chose not to hand into evidence and instead make a profit off of? And there's plenty of specific examples we can point to of his actions causing tragedy, like Rondell not following his advice leading to a shootout where even a kid dies, when Vic could have just arrested the guy. Think of all the chaos he is indirectly responsible for after the fallout of the money train heist, and even on the heist itself people die. If he hadn't assaulted a perp and shoved a bong down his mouth, the guy wouldn't have felt emasculated and then assault the next cop he sees in a similar manner, which just happened to be Ass Invader. Vic actively does work with cartels who ruin thousands of lives, selling deadly drugs, carrying out human trafficking, slavery, torture, murder, all sorts. And he is in bed with these very characters, many a time to make himself a wee profit on the side. Vic's compartmentalization is on full display when he's more than happy to call street guys thugs and scum who sell to children, unless of course they're dealers who are subservient to him and are giving him some kind of benefit. Number 5. Leaving Kern to die. Kern Little was a rapper and former leader of the 1-9er gang who stayed away from the drug world during his period of success in the music industry, working with the strike team on occasion, and then after some time returning to the drug business. Kern is in 4 seasons of the show, and from all the street thugs and gangsters we see, he's arguably the most memorable, given his longevity and proximity to the strike team, and plus some memorable scenes he's involved in, like him being one of the 2 gang leaders Vic locks up in a container for a night, emerging the next morning victorious after a fight to the death. And also, there is one point where he and Vic do a deal, Kern fulfilling his promise, but Vic reneging on it, which does give you a degree of sympathy for Kern, seeing as though he is hurt by it. In season 5, Vic helps gang leader Antoine Mitchell's men break into a police warehouse in exchange for keeping Lem alive if he ends up in prison. Unbeknownst to Vic, Kern poses a threat to Mitchell, and one of Mitchell's goons shoots Kern and leaves with the goods they need. Mackey is visibly devastated, frustrated that he's been duped and there's nothing he can do about it. And none of this is evil by Vic Mackey standards, but it's when you see that Kern is still alive, when you see him beg Vic for help, only for Vic to leave him to bleed out and die. Even Ronnie and the racist Shane didn't want to leave him there, but Vic overruled them and staged the crime scene. It's cold stuff and more gut-wrenching because we know Kern. We have done for a number of seasons, and he was kind of likeable in comparison to many of the street characters. And not to mention an innocent guard was also killed. Number 4. Torturing and killing Guardo. Now, this is an interesting one. After Lem's death, Vic is determined to find his killer and bring him to justice. In season 5, Guardo, a Salvatorian drug kingpin, conducts a series of attacks using grenades, leading the strike team and IAD to infiltrate and shut down one of his factories. It's one of Guardo's grenades that Shane steals to eventually kill Lem, but due to the use of a grenade, Vic heavily suspects Guardo is behind Lem's murder, leading him to spend a significant amount of time in season 6 tracking down Guardo. He does so by kidnapping Guardo's pregnant girlfriend and staging a ransom. When Guardo comes out of hiding, Vic captures him, taking him to a safe house where he brutally tortures and interrogates him. Guardo denies any involvement and postpones his torture by giving Vic a false lead, and in the meantime trying to convince Shane of his innocence. Shane, of course, already knowing that he's innocent because he's the one who killed him. It's Shane who actually tells Guardo that his girlfriend is pregnant with his child. And though it looks like Vic is going to spare the Salvadorian after resuming the torture, eventually he shoots him in the head and burns the body. Now, the reason why this one is a bit different is because though Vic cruelly tortured who we know to be an innocent man, Guardo was a scumbag who was guiltless of this particular crime, but responsible for a whole lot of others. So on one hand, there's a sickening element seeing Vic seething and scowling with passion as he viscerally torments his victim. On the other hand, Guardo had it coming. Maybe not for this, but he was involved in numerous other crimes. Heck, the reason why Vic suspects him in the first place is because he was throwing grenades into backyard barbecues full of families, and after his death, it's revealed that he was responsible for the murder of 11 Mexicans at the San Marcos apartments. So no one's going to miss him. He was a cartel member who was as bad as they come, and if he didn't do them, there's a whole bunch of crimes he could easily be tortured for. But none of those are why he was tortured. It's not like Vic went after him because he cares so deeply about Guardo's roster of victims. Otherwise, he'd track him down after the guy was tossing grenades in people's gardens. And he'd also torture the likes of Antoine Mitchell and Armadillo. As I mentioned in my review of Season 6, it felt really dirty and taboo to be in the room, witnessing Vic relishing the opportunity to inflict as much pain on Guardo as he can, when the man really responsible is standing right next to him. And if Vic wants to use the eye for an eye justification, for all he knew, Lem died straight away from the grenade, so he should have put a bullet in Guardo and be done with it. And for what it's worth, Vic does actually express remorse later on for killing an innocent man when he finds out that Shane was the one who offed Lem. Number 3. Betraying Ronnie. As the show rammed its way to its climax, one of the major storylines was Vic's immunity deal with ICE, where he'd confessed to all his crimes in exchange for protection. He pushes and pushes for it, and eventually ICE go ahead with it, only to drop the bombshell that the deal is for him and him alone, not for Ronnie also, as was intended. Vic refuses to go ahead with it at first, but later, not knowing that his ex-wife Corinne is working with the cops, he's under the impression that she is in trouble with the law, so he goes back to ICE and accepts the deal for himself, with a footnote to protect Corinne. Selling out Ronnie was wrong on so many levels. Again, there is the argument, as with many of these entries, of, well, he did have it coming. After all, Ronnie was on the same strike team that Vic led, and he was very rarely a voice of dissent to their actions. But what sticks out for me in particular is that there's a moment where it all gets too much for Ronnie. He can't take the heat, and he tells Vic he's going to make a run for it, ride off into the horizon and take his chances. But it's Vic who stops him. It's Vic who ties him down and then declares if their last-ditch plan doesn't work, then they'll both run together. Instead, all throughout the final episode of the show, Vic keeps Ronnie nurtured and docile, a sacrificial lamb so that he can get away for all his crimes and Ronnie can go down for them all. And when I say all, I mean all. As for Vic to ensure the immunity deal doesn't come back to bite him, he has to confess everything, even things that he and the team once suspected of, so he admits to everything, leaving Ronnie naked, the last member of the strike team, to take as many charges as possible that are fired at him. And fired they will be, of course, as he's the only person left to take the barn and Claudette's fury. Vic was always the one touting the "we are family" line. We're in this together, all for one and one for all. But in the end, this proved to be gaslighting and manipulation of the highest order. Because when his back was against the wall, he chose to save himself, to insulate himself as much as possible and leave Ronnie to take what comes. Which is likely not only to be a prison sentence, but a death sentence. As it's made quite a big deal that if any of one of these guys ends up in the can, they'll probably be killed by one of the gang members they locked up, like Antoine Mitchell. Let's not forget, there were still options at this stage. Vic could still have run with Ronnie. He'd lose his family, his job, his pension, which he did anyway, ironically. But that's the point. When push came to shove, and he stacked those elements up against his friendship with Ronnie, he chose himself. He chose to be a sellout, a rat, to implicate Ronnie in enough to put him away for a lifetime. And he was so brazen and cold about it too, telling the Ice Lady Victoria that he'll string him along. For the most part, Ronnie was Vic's most loyal friend. He never made mistakes, he trusted Vic and had his back, proven by things like him murdering that dude on the bed to protect Vic, only for Vic to betray him. Vic is a master of compartmentalization and justifying his crimes to himself, and a part of me wonders if he was always itching to take Ice's deal even without Ronnie, and the situation with Corinne just provided him with the justification he needed. After all, how bad would it have really been for his ex if she went down for helping him? With her clean record and her being able to argue that she was coerced or manipulated, surely a short stretch if anything. I know it would be tough for her, but was it really too extreme that it was worth instead sending Ronnie down for the rest of his life? I don't think so. And I wonder if on some level Vic knows it, but he will always frame it as something that he had to do for his family. Number 2. Framing O'Brien. Neil O'Brien was a low-level criminal who gets caught in the fallout of Vic's Armenian money train robbery. Shane's wife Mara takes marked cash from the money train and is blackmailed by her mother. The strike team decide they need a mark to take a hit for the spent marked money, and Neil O'Brien fits the bill, seeing as though he has a brother in the same town that the cash was being spent in, and that he was a non-gang affiliated criminal. Lem and Ronnie leave a large amount of cash on the ground, which O'Brien picks up and is later arrested and interrogated for. He claims the money isn't his, spends a short amount of time in jail, and lays low after his release. Unbeknownst to him, the Armenian mob were on the hunt for anyone who had connections to the money train robbery, and he was now a prime target. Yes, we have to mention that Vic and his team tracked down O'Neill and tried to convince him to leave town for his safety, and, if we're honest, so that he isn't later arrested and fingers the strike team for their involvement. And whilst O'Neill agrees, he stays in town a little while to collect some winnings for a basketball game. Unfortunately, in that time, he is found and killed. Not just him, but a friend of his also, Rex. The strike team discover his body, his feet severed from the rest, as was the customary signature from the Armenian mob. This one is particularly sickening. Some may want to argue that, like Guardo, he too was a criminal and had it coming, but comparing O'Neill to a cartel kingpin is way off the mark. O'Neill's crimes included the likes of armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon, so he was no saint, but for all we know, he was living life as a civilian, and his only crime here was picking up a wad of cash he happened to find lying around, which is something any of us could, and probably would, have done. The idea that this small error, manufactured by the strike team to selfishly solve an issue for themselves that they had brought upon themselves, causes O'Brien to get arrested, interrogated, incarcerated, and kidnapped and presumably tortured is deeply troubling, meaning this storyline affected me quite a bit. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that the idea of someone having pain inflicted upon them or being killed but not knowing why it's happening, not being afforded the context, is really disturbing for me. And just to think, O'Brien is going about his business, and only a few hours later he was probably covered in his own blood, answers being demanded from him about the money train which he knows nothing about, and then he's killed, his feet chopped off for good measure. Imagine how scared he was in his final moments, not knowing what was going on, why he was being tortured. And if Vic did happen to tell him why, I don't actually remember if he did, but if he did, that makes it even worse, because O'Brien would surely know from the moment the cartel got a hold of him that it was curtains for him. The strike team would have known that whoever they used as a mark would be in instant danger. They knowingly put a target on O'Brien's back. The reaction from Vic and the team once they discover his death is more or less a collective oops before they utilize the killing to their advantage, denying O'Brien a burial by burning the body so the feds would think he was still alive, still a fugitive, and thus would not exclusively focus on the strike team for the money train robbery. And at number 1, it's killing Terry Crowley. I mean, this one had to be at number 1, right? The shocking murder of Crowley and the framing of it as a gangbanger killing is something so integral, so essential for The Shield and for Vic Mackey, both in terms of its development of the show and for him personally. It goes above and beyond just being something terrible that Vic did. It's the entire genesis of the show, the action of Vic by which all others are judged. I remember when I first watched the show, I thought to myself, the show's made a big mistake here, having Vic kill another cop in the first episode, because unlike, say, The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, we won't be able to have that moral tug of war with the character, the internal battle in our minds as to whether he's a good guy or not. That gradual slip into degeneracy and evil wasn't there. Instead, it was a cold, sharp slap. But that's what makes it so unique. You see this horrific action so early on in the series, and then it's like the show makes you forget he did it, occasionally bringing it up as a soft reminder, but having Vic operate in such a hellhole, you just end up feeling he's battling forces much more evil than he is. It's only right at the end of the show, when the murder of Crowley is brought back again full circle, that it sinks in just how evil this man is, as if the show says, "What? You forgetting he killed a cop in cold blood in the very first episode? What did you expect?" And in universe, again, I can't think of anything that Vic does that is more despicable. Crowley was a fellow police officer, a cop trying to do good. Little is known about his life outside the job, but he does mention to Vic that his dad was a police officer, and we see his brother in a later season, and it all points to him being a decent man. And yes, he was investigating Vic, yes, he was doing it partially to further his own career, but so what? He was a cop, part of an operation looking to put dirty cops behind bars. Vic frames it as him being a rat, in the usual way he compartmentalizes his actions, but the reality is that Vic was as dirty as it gets and Terry was doing his job. This was an execution and a betrayal of a fellow member of the badge to save his own skin. And when you think about it, it was major overkill. It wasn't as if the strike team were backed into a corner at this point. Crowley had nothing on them. Vic could have stringed him along, maybe even try to tempt him to join his side, find a way to showcase that he's incompetent and needs to be kicked off the team, something, anything, aside from straight up putting a bullet in the guy's head. So there you have it. What do you make of my list? And what does your own look like? Let me know down in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.